I've been thinking a lot lately. And when that happens, it's probably not a good thing because I've come up with some hot takes for SOD that may make the game more fun, at least in my opinion. Now, these takes might leave you scratching your head, but more likely it'll make a lot of you angry, leading you to blow up my comment section. However, I legitimately think that these ideas would help SOD out tremendously, so let's get right into the list of hot takes. First hot take I have is that I think that SOD PvP should be balanced around 1v1s. In no other iteration of WoW has this really been done. PvP has pretty much always been about arenas, and maybe a mini hot take here is that arenas should never be added into Classic WoW because we have other iterations of the game for that. The reason being that arena just adds more instance content for people to AFK in the main city for, which I generally want to avoid. But going to my main hot take, 1v1s and big team battles are the true essence of Classic WoW. When you go out into the open world, you want to get into one-on-one scraps with the enemy faction and maybe even make a server long enemy. Or you want to get into a big massive battle, which are usually determined by who has more people and or AoE classes like mages or hunter, but these encounters are still fun. And for this reason, I think the game should be centered around 1v1 balance because big team battles are never really balanced anyway. Imagine every fight you take into the open world felt fair and skillful, and the better player would most likely win, and also more importantly, there aren't any auto loss matchups. People who play warrior as a main in SOD on a PvP server probably know the misery like me where you go to take a fight in the open world and lose to the majority of other classes if the other player knows what they're doing, of course. It's simply not fun. And with the addition of this 1v1 balance, we can get some really unique PvP centered content at max level. Imagine this for a second. In phase 4 or 5, we get a new goblin area in Gadgetsin and Winter Spring that basically is a series of fighting pits that you can queue up for to get inside of the ring. Here, you would fight other players for glory and a new reputation with some cool cosmetic items, maybe even a PvP centered item. This could be similar to the center of Gadgetsin, where it's a huge dome where basically people can fight in, but imagine it being a lot bigger. Competitors who want to fight can go underneath the arena to queue up, while the spectators can gather around the arena up top to watch all the fights, and maybe even they could add a unique world buff from everybody watching the fight. And simply standing around and watching the fight would give you said world buff. Now, the main thing to take away from this is that it would allow people to go out into the world and do something fun. It would allow people to 1v1, and if the game is balanced around 1v1 duels, then this would work out even better. And the last point I want to make about this is that I think that balancing around 1v1s should be done to avoid as much homogenization as possible. I even think that it's okay to have somewhat bad matchups in 1v1s in order to preserve class identity, just as long as it's a last resort type of thing. Okay, hot take number 2, classic raids should be difficult, with some of the final bosses being very difficult. I already know that some of you are getting ready to type or are already rolling your eyes, but hear me out first. Raiding is the culmination of all your grinding coming to fruition in the end game. It's where players can take on the toughest challenges and get the best gear. But when raiding is easy, guess what happens? People raid log, people quit, and people get bored. Think about it. If you're a casual player and you beat the raid, what more is there to grind for? Sure, you can grind gold, some reputations and dungeons for pre-bis gear, but who cares? You already beat the game and that's really lame. Hard content in a game like Classic will give people a goal, a purpose to gear, and feel that addiction that some people might even crave. It's the feeling that you want to get all the gear from the content that the devs create just to get a bigger and bigger edge to maybe overcome a new boss. To counteract this raiding experience, which surely will alienate the more casual audience of SOD, they should add more endgame open world and casual content that makes people log in as well. I already talked about the 1v1 and brawling arena, but there's so many ideas I came up with that can keep people playing. Another favorite idea of mine is a new reputation with a sneaky Zandalari troll that wants you to gather blood from the opposite faction in open world PvP for some nefarious reason. But we know it's secretly for Hakar, obviously. In this reputation, you must equip a unique PvP trinket or a PvP item of some sort that the NPC gives you that allows you to gather blood when you kill the opposite faction. And to avoid griefing, the blood currency that you get is only awarded when you kill another max level character by yourself, pretty much 100 to 0. You probably have to do like 90% of their HP. And you can only get blood one time per player, so you can't farm the same person over and over to grief them. Basically, you would venture out solo and 1v1 enemy players and be awarded blood to turn into this new vendor for maybe a tabard, a mount, and maybe a new unique equipable PvP item that'll help you in PvP in some fashion. Now, this is a great idea, but we're kind of going off course here. I just wanted to give an example of some more open world content that sounds cool on paper and might be something they want to add and would add to the game so that you could make raiding hard. And if I can come up with something like this, and I'm sure Blizzard can come up with so many different ideas for how to flesh out the open world. And in the end, raiding should always be this elusive concept to casual players to get them more engrossed in the game. And the rest of the game should be easy enough to get into and have fun with without having to dumb down raids to a sad state that they're currently in. And the main feeling I want to bring back to World of Warcraft Classic is the feeling of maybe awe or just sheer awesomeness of looking at a player who's fully completed the raid, because that is basically gone. But I remember back in the day, there wasn't a lot of information on the raids and not many people have done it, at least on my server. And in the end, I think it would just flesh out the experience and bring it back to what the game was like originally, which was a big open world. And then when you finally hit that end game, you could look at all the awesome people who have done all the hard content, and it would kind of light a fire under you to be like, hey, I want to be like them. I want to do that hard content. I might have to join a guild. I might have to do a bunch of pre-best dungeons and all that good stuff. But once I do that, I can actually try to tackle a raid and achieve something in this game that I enjoy. And I want to bring that experience back. And hot take number 3, world buffs are good for the game. And the reason for that is that world buffs get people out and about in the open world, as well as making raiding more fun. There's nothing like playing a warrior or rogue with full world buffs, hitting nasty crits with Envenom or Execute, and for that reason, I think it'd be a shame to get rid of them. So how can we keep them fun but less annoying? The main idea is that world buffs should be picked up each week, and after gathering them all, the timer doesn't deplete when going into a raid instance, regardless of whether you die or not. However, the timer depletes when you're not in a raid or dungeon. What this means is they can balance the content around world buffs because they are basically permanent for that week when you gather them and raid. So we get to keep the gather part of world buffs, but make them permanent for actual raiding. Yet I know that there are going to be a lot of people who won't like this idea, because if these changes were in the game in a world where the content was hard like I talked about earlier, then the content would have to be designed around world buffs, which casual players probably don't want to be forced into getting in order to raid. And to counteract this, they could make the world buffs last a long time, so you basically use them for multiple weeks instead of having to gather them weekly. Or even they could make the world buffs into a quest chain to gather the world buffs, and once you've completed all the quest chains involved with each particular world buff, they are now permanent whenever you go into a new raid instance for the entirety of SOD. However, I honestly like the idea of world buffs lasting multiple weeks, so you don't have to farm them like every week. It could be every other week or every 3 weeks maybe even, because it allows people to still go out into the open world and gather them. You can now have them permanently and raid with them, and the game can be balanced around them, and you can just have fun all the time when you raid. And lastly, they wouldn't be as annoying to gather. And my last hot take is going to be that later expansions have some things that should be added to Classic that are sheer quality of life changes. And I'm sure there are going to be a few in here that I mentioned that a lot of you guys will not agree with. So first up, I've been playing a bit of Cataclysm, and there are things that I like, such as flying mounts. I think that they should be added into the game as a new feature. Nah, I'm just playing. That would be funny, but no, I do not think flying mounts should be added to the game. But now that we're talking about mounts, I do think that one important feature that Cataclysm has that would be good in SOD is that the casting time for your mount should be a lot lower. If you've ever played Cataclysm, you know that when you try to summon your mount, it's very quick and snappy, and it's just something that makes the game feel more fluid. Additionally, I think that your movement speed while you're dead and in ghost form should be drastically faster, and just as you guessed it, like Cataclysm. I mean, we're dead incorporeal spirits, we shouldn't be as slow as we normally are in game. And I'm not just talking about wisp form fast, I'm talking about epic mount speed in that sucker. Classic WoW graveyards are already spread out so much that it would make death a lot less annoying if you were able to travel really fast while dead. And lastly, I think we should have the retail LFG system in Classic. And I know what you're thinking, it is not the looking for dungeon system like in Wrath of the Lich King. Just the in-game system where you can select what dungeon you want to form a group for, and any player looking to do that dungeon can see your name there and whisper for an invite. And no, it doesn't involve teleporting to the dungeon or anything like that. It just simply allows you to quickly see each dungeon and quickly message people who are also looking for that dungeon as well. And that's it, guys. These are some of my hot takes for what I think would make SOD more fun and better. I know there's going to be a ton of people who might hate me now, might send me a death threat, but hey, I thought it would be a fun concept for a video for all the controversial ideas I have for SOD and what I think they should do for the game. But let me know what you guys think about every one of these hot takes in the comment section, and dare I say, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe because it'll help me out a lot. But that'll be it for me, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I'm out.